Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I think that was a deplorable speech. And what I have to say is that in 3.5 years since those earthquakes, Labor Party members who have repeatedly said how they were out there with the people, working with the people, empathising with the people, feeling with the people, have made no more than 5 requests for assistance through EQC. 5. I have the record here. I'm happy to table it. Repeatedly.
Order.
I'm sorry, Ms Dyson, it's not a lie. It is an undeniable fact.
Please. Members know that they must not use that term in connection with another member. Members know that. Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, it is an undeniable fact that only 5 cases have been put before the EQC in the last 3.5 years. Plenty of tub thumping about people's bad circumstances, but 5 cases only.
Point of order, Honourable
I do apologise to the Minister and the Chair, but I cannot sit here and listen to Ms Dyson continue to use those terms time and again after being implored by you not to.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the member, but I will now say the member will desist. If you continue to use the words which I admonished her for, she will leave the chamber. Members know the rules. Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
So not only have there only been 5 cases brought by Labor members of Parliament to EQC in the last 3 years, 2 of them have been brought to EQC by Poto Williams, who's only been in the place for 6 months. So what we saw the other day was the most despicable political manipulation of a vulnerable person in Canterbury. Did they tell us prior, when they found out that that poor woman was in that bad circumstance? No. They went and they organised a photo op for David Cunliffe and Clayton Cosgrove and Ms Dyson to turn up there and grandstand on the misery of that woman. That is utterly despicable, and it is typical of the way Labor members have behaved in Christchurch for the last 3.5 years. Utter despicable behaviour. Mr Speaker, the comments about the size of CERA I find quite amusing. Firstly, it was never meant to be just a small policy shop. There was a massive gap in the capability of the Christchurch City Council to deliver on any recovery plans. So I would simply ask Labor members this. Tell us what work CERA should stop. Tell us what work CERA should stop. And what do we get? Blank faces and more renting. Blank faces and more renting. Just tell us one thing that CERA should not be doing. Mr Speaker, there has been a huge job done in Canterbury by the workers who are part of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority. There are some 24 recovery plans in place. CERA leads 14 of those. CERA sits alongside community organisations that lead others. There has been a massive effort to rezone land and to make it safe for people to occupy. And yes, I have to say it's disappointing, again that word, because things could have gone more quickly. But the courts have had far too much to say, in my opinion, and have in fact not understood what natural justice is for people who are waiting even now to find out what they're doing. Now you see the sort of reaction that is being exhibited over there, Mr Speaker. Ranting, screaming, raging, mock anger. That doesn't do anything for anyone who has got a difficult circumstance to deal with. And I say again, Mr Speaker, I've got the evidence here, I'm going to table it. 5 complaints to EQC only by Labor Party members. 2 from Ms Dyson, 1 from Ms Dalzell and 2 from Poto Williams, who to her credit in only 6 months has managed to get those complaints up. But it was a shocker the other day to use that 85-year-old woman in the way the Labor Party did was simply outrageous. There wasn't a darn thing that the photo opportunity with David Cunliffe could achieve. Nothing. And did they tell us? How long did they know for? I understand they knew for 3 months. They knew before Christmas that that woman was living in those disastrous circumstances. Did they tell us? No. They sat on it because this was an opportunity for David to come down and make a big grandstand over this. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to seek another speaking slot. There, Mr.
Honourable
Speaker.
Derry Brownlee.
Mr. Chairman, I should say. There are over 55,000 damaged homes that have now been completed through the EQC Earthquake Recovery Program. Mr. Speaker, I take the House back to just immediately after these disasters, where there were 3 important things that were said to us. So those things were, firstly, that our population would fall and start to leave the city. Second, that real estate values would fall dramatically and perhaps take up to a decade and a half to recover, and that we would have widespread unemployment and other social deprivation that is typical of disasters around the world. Mr. Speaker, but partly because of government response, but mostly because of Canterburyans' response to what the government has done in this process, we do not have any of those stats facing us at the present time. We've got a growing population in Canterbury. We've got the lowest unemployment of anywhere in New Zealand in Canterbury, and we have rising real estate prices to a point where some would say it's now a problem. Mr. Speaker, the one thing that is absolutely certain is that if people are to live good lives, they need to have income. The government moved very quickly after the earthquakes to put in place the wage subsidy, an amount that meant that any employer could claim up to $500 per worker per week while that business was reorganising itself to get back on its feet. That held employment in Canterbury. It gave time for businesses to move into new premises, to relocate, to offer their services or their products or whatever it might have been. And Mr. Speaker, the consequence of that is that we've had record levels of exports out of Canterbury over the last 4 or 5 quarters, and we have an economy that's now growing at close to 7%. All augurs well for the future of Canterbury. And the remaining EQC properties that are still problematic are in fact mostly multiple units, where there may be up to, in one case, 43 units on one title, with a range of insurers all trying to work out who pays for what. And Mr. Speaker, we will in the future have to look at land tenure, we'll have to look at conveyancing rules, and we'll have to look at the way in which body corporates are required to operate in order to ensure this disaster doesn't happen anywhere else in New Zealand. But, sir, to suggest that there is total doom and gloom in Canterbury is quite wrong. There is despair at the inability, it would seem, after 5 months for the new council to get on top of its bureaucracy. And I say again to Labor members, if there is anything that they can desperately or definitely demonstrate CERA, as the local Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, should not be doing, then I want to know about it. Because I can't think of one thing they're doing that is a duplication of council efforts or a duplication of any other efforts. I can think of a lot of well-meaning NGOs who want to be doing more in the space, but the reality is there has to be the resource available, and this government has not been stinting in making money and resource available to move things forward. I, sir, would like to take time, if it was available, to talk about some of the EQC cases that have made their way into the media in recent times. I'd like to talk, sir, about some of the Southern response cases that have made their way into the media in recent times. All I would say is that if people want to go to the media and complain that they're not being fairly treated, they have an obligation to put all of the information on the table so that everyone can see exactly how they are being treated. And Mr. Speaker, I suggest there would be many throughout New Zealand who might struggle to understand that there was mistreatment involved in many of those cases. It is a big job, and no one is resigning from that. It is a big job for the insurers. It's a big job for EQC. Mr Speaker, one thing that I must comment on is a Marsh report just recently saying that private insurers in Canterbury had performed worse than many other disasters in the world. The subtle difference, but extremely important, is that we had 21 months of shakes before we got a 3-month period where the insurers could start their work. Further to that, we've got a penetration rate of insurance in New Zealand at over 98%. No other jurisdiction in the world has that level. So, yep, it might be easy to say, oh, well, the insurers have done their work somewhere else. The fact is they had a lot less insured.
The question is that the report of the Finance and Expenditure Committee on the 2012-13 financial review of Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority be noted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Table. Members, I understand that the next report of interest is the Transport Industrial Relations Committee.